You know that moment when your family looks at you not as a person, but as a resource they can carve up? That was my reality not long ago. My name is Rachel Monroe, and what I am about to share is the story of how I stopped being the scapegoat in my own family and became the one who finally called the shots. It began with a house, a will, and a family that thought they could bully me into giving up the only thing that was ever truly mine. It is strange how quickly love turns into accusation when money enters the picture. One day, my parents were asking how work was going, and the next, they were telling me I was selfish for holding on to something that was already mine by law and by love. My younger sister Samantha cried into the phone, saying I was ruining her future. My parents arrived with a realtor, as if they could march me out of the property like I was a tenant trespassing in my own life. But what they did not know, what they could not have even imagined, was that I had already made my move days earlier. 3 days before their dramatic performance, I had sold the house, not just to anyone. The buyer was someone who would strike at the very core of their pride, someone whose presence alone would unravel their carefully constructed world. When I watched their faces as the truth unfolded, I understood something that had taken me 30 years to learn. The most powerful revenge is not anger, not screaming, not tears. It is a quiet, deliberate choice sealed in ink and protected by the law. Have you ever been called ungrateful for not handing over what you earned? Have you ever been told that love means sacrifice, when really it meant you giving and them taking? If so, you will understand the weight I carried and the satisfaction of what came next. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you will see how one small decision turned into the turning point of my entire life. Growing up in the Monroe household was a lesson in favoritism so sharp it might as well have been carved into the dinner table. I was the older daughter, the steady one, the one who kept my head down and worked hard. You might think that would have earned respect, but in our house, effort was invisible compared to Samantha's charm. Samantha, the golden child. Samantha, the delicate one who needed constant care. Samantha, who was chauffeured to her private school every morning while I waited for the city bus at dawn with a backpack heavier than my body. My parents always said I was independent, like it was a compliment. But it was not independence. It was neglect dressed up as character. Samantha had ballet classes, violin tutors, and summers abroad. When I asked to join the debate team at school, the answer was no. The fee was too much. 2 days later, Samantha had a brand new laptop worth more than my entire semester of classes. My report cards with straight A's were barely glanced at before the conversation returned to Samantha's art project, her recital, her accomplishments. The only person who saw me was Grandma Margaret. She was the kind of woman who spoke softly but carried a wisdom that could stop you in your tracks. While my parents drove Samantha to competitions, Grandma would slip into my room with cookies and ask about the robotics club I had scraped together money to join. She told me once, when I was 16, after my parents missed my National Honor Society induction to sit through another of Samantha's rehearsals, that they did not love her more. They loved themselves more. Samantha reflected the version of themselves they wished they were: shiny, artistic, adored. I reflected who they truly were: ordinary, practical, overlooked, and that frightened them. Those words built a wall of strength inside me, one brick at a time. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state college, while Samantha floated through half a dozen majors on my parents' dime. She always had a safety net. I had a survival instinct. The day I earned my accounting license, I celebrated alone with Grandma at her kitchen table, while my parents sipped cocktails on a beach trip to celebrate Samantha's latest engagement. That engagement lasted 4 months, of course, but I kept moving forward. Sometimes the deepest cuts are not loud moments of betrayal but quiet ones that remind you of your place. On my 25th birthday, I waited all day for a call, a text, anything. Nothing came. By noon, I saw my mother's post on social media. Shopping day with my baby girl. The picture showed her and Samantha clinking champagne glasses, arms heavy with shopping bags. It was not even Samantha's birthday month. For mine, I got silence. For hers, every day was a celebration. But Grandma never forgot me. She showed up with lasagna when I passed my exams, framed my first business card, and clipped my college essays for her book club. She believed in me with a devotion that carried me through every disappointment. When she told me one Sunday that someday I would have more than just her love to remember her by, I thought she meant photographs or a necklace. I never imagined she meant the house on Willow Street. That house was not just walls and a roof. It was the garden where I learned patience, The kitchen where the smell of apple pie meant love. The porch where we sat in silence and understood each other without words. While my parents paraded Samantha through art shows, I spent summers in that house planting roses with Grandma, baking bread, listening to her tell stories about how family is not just blood but choice. So when Grandma passed, I thought I had lost my only real family. Then the lawyer read her will and named me the sole heir of the Willow Street house, and I realized she had left me more than love. She had left me protection, a fortress of my own. But I also knew what would come next. In the Monroe family, nothing that belonged to me ever stayed mine for long. My parents called almost immediately, their voices sugar-sweet, dripping with false concern. It is a big responsibility, Rachel, maybe too much for one person. Samantha wept, begging me to share, to sell, to split it. And behind her tears was my father's cold ultimatum. Either I handed over what was mine, or I was out of the family, as if I had ever truly been in. When the lawyer confirmed the house was mine, I could already hear the gears of my parents' manipulation turning. They started with kindness, asking if I was sure I could handle the burden of maintaining a home. They reminded me that Samantha was starting a new chapter in her life, that it was only fair she had a place to grow. They talked about responsibility, but what they meant was control. Within days, the sweet words hardened into pressure. The text messages began before sunrise and continued until midnight. Rachel, family means sharing. Rachel, don't be selfish. Rachel, Grandma would not want you to keep this all to yourself. Each message felt like a hammer, pounding at the edges of my resolve. My father added the sharp edge of threats. Either you sell and divide the money, or you will no longer be welcome in this family. My mother piled on the guilt. How could I turn my back on my sister in her moment of need? And then there was Samantha, who turned her tears into a performance worthy of an audience. She cried about her future, about her boyfriend, about the unfairness of struggling when I had been handed a house she imagined should be hers by birthright, because in her mind, everything always was. I knew her apartment rent was covered by our parents. I knew her job was cushioned by connections, yet she cried as though I had stolen something from her. Soon the relatives joined in. Aunts and uncles who had not spoken to me in years sent carefully worded messages about family unity. Cousins repeated the same phrases, as if reading from a script. Think about what is best for everyone. Samantha has always been fragile. You are the strong one. Share. Be fair. The words circled me like vultures, each one tearing at the quiet joy I had felt when the house became mine. Sleep became scarce. My phone buzzed constantly. I silenced it, but then the emails arrived. I ignored them, but then came the letters. Each word was designed to corner me, to make me feel like I owed them something I never received in return. I remembered the birthdays spent alone, the graduations where my achievements were ignored, the years of being the afterthought while Samantha was celebrated. And yet now, they told me it was selfish to want one thing for myself. The pressure mounted until it felt like I was being squeezed out of my own skin. But somewhere in the middle of the noise, something hardened in me. For once, I did not want to bend. I did not want to surrender. I wanted to hold on to what my grandmother had given me, not because it was valuable, but because it was mine. That is when a message arrived that changed everything. It came from an unknown number. Rachel, this is Daniel Wu. I heard you might be selling the Willow Street property. I am interested. Can we talk? Daniel Wu. My old study partner from college, the one who used to stay up late with me solving accounting problems while everyone else partied. He had gone on to build a tech company from scratch. He was successful, wealthy, respected, and, in a twist only fate could write, he was now the chief executive officer of the very company where Samantha had recently been promoted. The moment I read his name, a slow smile spread across my face. The family wanted me to sell. They had demanded it, forced it, tried to bully me into it. Fine. I would sell, just not to them. I replied quickly, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. Yes, let's talk, but it must remain confidential. His response was immediate. Understood. I can meet tonight. And Rachel, I remember how they treated you back then. This time, you call the shots. For the first time since the will was read, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This was no longer about surviving their pressure. This was about outsmarting them. Meeting Daniel that evening felt like stepping into a different version of myself. We sat at a quiet cafe away from the neighborhoods where whispers traveled fast. He looked older, sharper, but the same steady confidence lingered in his eyes. He listened as I explained the inheritance, the pressure, the relentless guilt campaign. He didn't interrupt, didn't question my motives. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "You don't have to let them control the story this time. Sell it to me. Clean, legal, no room for dispute." The decision was easier than I expected. Daniel's offer was above market value. More than that, he promised discretion until the papers were signed. He understood the importance of timing, of catching my family off guard. Within 48 hours, the contracts were drawn, notarized, filed with the county. By the time my parents marched into the lawyer's office with their realtor and their threats, the house no longer belonged to me. It was Daniel's. I kept quiet through the meeting as they paraded their arguments. My father's voice dripped with authority, insisting the will could be contested. My mother clasped Samantha's hand, demanding fairness. Samantha played her role perfectly, tears running down her cheeks, whispering that she only wanted what was right. The realtor slid her papers across the table, ready for me to sign. I stayed silent, holding my phone under the table, reading Daniel's text that had just arrived. Contract signed. Ready when you are. It took everything in me not to smile. I agreed to their suggestion that we all drive to the Willow Street house together. They thought they had cornered me, that this was their final push to make me surrender. I knew better. I drove separately, the convoy behind me like a parade of vultures. My phone buzzed again. Daniel's message flashed on the screen. Papers filed. Tesla in the driveway. See you soon. When we turned onto the street, the house stood tall and familiar. The garden blooming the way Grandma had always kept it. And there, gleaming in the driveway, was Daniel's car. I stepped out of mine just as Samantha's gasp echoed across the yard. "That's my boss's car," she whispered, her face pale. My father frowned, confused. What would he be doing here? Before I could answer, the front door opened, and there was Daniel. Casual clothes, calm presence, authority radiating from him in a way that needed no explanation. He looked at me first. Rachel, perfect timing. Then he nodded toward my stunned family. The silence was a gift I had waited my whole life for. My father sputtered, insisting the house was mine. Daniel corrected him politely. It was, until 3 days ago. Now it was his, purchased legally, above asking price. The lawyer confirmed every detail, pulling out documents to silence the room. My mother's voice cracked as she tried to spin it into betrayal. How could I do this to family? Samantha's tears turned frantic. "You sold my future," she cried, as though her entitlement had been carved into stone. Daniel remained unshaken, reminding them that the transaction was legal and binding. If anyone had been taken advantage of, it was him. He had paid more than the property was worth. Neighbors began to gather, curiosity pulling them to their porches. Whispers spread quickly. Some pulled out phones, recording the spectacle. For once, the judgment was not directed at me. It fell squarely on the people who had tried to strip me of everything. My father shouted about fraud, about manipulation, about lawsuits. My mother accused Daniel of conspiring with me to destroy their family. Samantha begged for mercy, terrified of what working under her boss in this house would mean. Every accusation, every plea, only made the truth shine brighter. They had no power here. Daniel's leadership team arrived soon after, cars pulling up one by one. They walked through the house with purpose, discussing office layouts, pointing out where desks and whiteboards would go. Samantha's department head greeted me warmly, congratulating me on securing a stable place to live through the lease agreement Daniel had written for me. The revelation struck my parents silent. Not only had I sold the house, I had secured my own future within it. For the first time, I looked at my family and felt no fear, no guilt, no lingering need for approval. They could threaten, they could cry, they could curse my name in every relative's ear, but they could not take this from me. The house was gone from their grasp, the battle already decided before they even arrived. Standing there on the porch, with neighbors watching, lawyers confirming, and Daniel by my side, I realized something Grandma had always known. Real power is not loud. It is not a raised voice or a slammed door. It is a quiet contract, a sealed envelope, a decision made without their permission. The moment stretched long and tight, like a bowstring pulled to its limit. My father's face turned the color of ripe plums, veins visible in his temples as he tried to regain the authority he had always wielded in our household. "This is fraud," he barked, his voice louder than the murmurs of the neighbors now gathering in clusters on the sidewalk. "You manipulated her. You took advantage of our daughter." Daniel didn't flinch. He actually laughed, a calm, measured laugh that carried more weight than my father's rage ever could. "Mr. Monroe, I paid $800,000 for this house, $20,000 over the appraised value. If anyone was taken advantage of, it was me. But I wanted this specific property, in this specific neighborhood. It serves my company's needs perfectly." Samantha's mascara was running down her cheeks in streaks as she stared at him, her lips trembling. You bought it? For what? To humiliate me?" Daniel's tone remained professional. "To expand the company. We're opening a satellite office for the marketing team. That happens to be your department, Samantha." Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the porch rail like it was the only thing holding her upright. "You can't make me work here," she whispered, eyes darting between him and me. "You're welcome to request a transfer," he replied evenly, "but refusing a reasonable work assignment could be viewed as insubordination. That decision is yours." The words hung heavy in the air, and I could see her mind racing, weighing her pride against her paycheck. My mother stepped forward, her voice shrill. "You're punishing her. This is harassment. She should have inherited this house." The lawyer, Miss Patel, who had been observing quietly until then, finally spoke. "Mrs. Monroe, your mother's will was ironclad. She specifically left this house to Rachel alone. No sharing clauses, no family overrides. She even instructed me to ensure that you and your husband had no influence over it. Your mother was of sound mind, evaluated by 2 doctors, and she made her intentions clear." The color drained from my mother's face. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if words had abandoned her. The neighbors leaned closer, eating up every word. Mrs. Chen from across the street called out, "Margaret told us all about how she wanted Rachel protected. She was proud of her, proud that she stood on her own." It was like a knife twisting in my mother's pride. She had spent decades parading Samantha's every minor success while pretending I didn't exist. And now, in front of witnesses, it was revealed that Grandma had seen the truth all along. My father growled, "We'll sue. This sale won't hold up. It was manipulation." Miss Patel shook her head. "You have no grounds. The sale was clean. Funds have already cleared. The deed is recorded with the county. Your threats carry no weight." She laid the documents across the hood of her car like evidence in a courtroom. Rachel acted entirely within her rights. Daniel stepped forward, his presence filling the space. "And let's be clear, your behavior today is not just embarrassing. It's unlawful. You're trespassing on private property. Unless Rachel invites you inside, you need to leave." All eyes turned to me. For the first time in my life, the power was mine to wield. My parents, Samantha, the relatives who had bombarded me with messages they were waiting on me. I could feel their desperation, their anger, their disbelief. I looked straight at them and said, "No, you're not welcome here." My mother's lips curled into something between a snarl and a sob. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I finally stopped letting you destroy me." The crowd of neighbors murmured, some even clapping quietly. Samantha's department head, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer, turned to her and said, "We'll see you Monday at 9 in the new office. Don't be late." Samantha looked like she might faint. The movers began unloading office, furniture, desks, chairs, a conference table carrying it right past my family and into the house. Each item was a reminder that the future had already been decided. Samantha's future, my future, and none of it was theirs to control anymore. My father jabbed a finger in my direction. "You're done. You're out of this family." I met his gaze without flinching. "Promise?" The words cut deeper than any scream could have. He faltered, his authority crumbling in the face of my calm. My mother pulled on his arm, muttering about leaving, but not before Samantha hissed at me, her voice low and venomous. "When this falls apart, when you're alone with no family left, remember you did this." I leaned in, so close she had no choice but to hear me. "I'll remember. Every morning when I wake up in my grandmother's house, every evening when I sit in her garden, every time I don't have to beg for your approval, I'll remember." They left in a fury of slamming car doors and screeching tires, but the battle was already over. The house was mine no longer, but neither was it theirs. It was Daniel's, and through him, it had become my fortress. I had a lease, a right of first refusal if he ever sold, and most importantly, peace. That night, as I sat in the upstairs apartment Daniel had secured for me, I felt a calm I had never known. For once, I wasn't bracing for the next blow, the next guilt trip, the next way they would twist my existence to benefit Samantha. For once, I was free. The silence of the house was not empty. It was full of Grandma's presence. Her apron still hung on its hook in the kitchen. Her roses still bloomed in the garden. And in every corner, I felt her telling me I had finally done what she always hoped I would: stand up and claim the life I deserved. The days that followed were like living in two different worlds stacked on top of each other. Upstairs, in the apartment Daniel had secured for me, life was peaceful. I woke in the same bedroom where Grandma used to tuck me in during summer visits, brewed coffee in her kitchen, and watched the morning light spill across the garden she and I had planted together. Downstairs, however, the house had transformed into a bustling satellite office. Sleek desks lined the walls, whiteboards filled with marketing strategies, and the low hum of computers blended with the sound of voices discussing campaigns and deadlines. And every morning at exactly 9 o'clock, Samantha arrived. She never came early, never late. She parked in the employee section Daniel had marked out and walked past my door with her head held stiff, refusing to look up at my window. At first, her defiance made me laugh, but over time, it became something else. A daily reminder that the one who had tried to take everything from me now had to pass under my roof to do her job. The irony was not lost on me, nor was it lost on the neighbors. They watched Samantha arrive in her carefully curated outfits, watched her leave with slumped shoulders, and whispered to one another. The Monroe family drama had become the neighborhood's favorite story, and for once, I was not the villain in their eyes. Inside, Samantha struggled. Her ideas in meetings lacked substance. Her presentations faltered. Jennifer, her department head, grew sharper in her feedback. "You need to bring more than charm to the table," I overheard one afternoon through the vents that connected the upstairs to the downstairs. "This role requires results." Without our parents to shield her, Samantha was exposed. She had always been able to rely on them to cushion her failures, to celebrate mediocrity as though it were brilliance. Now, stripped of that safety net, she floundered. And though I tried to feel pity, though part of me wanted to extend a hand, I could not forget the way she had tried to strip me of my inheritance with tears and lies. Our parents did not stay silent. They called, they wrote, they even showed up at the house once, demanding Daniel sell the property back to them. He refused without hesitation. "The house is not on the market," he told them firmly, "and if you continue to harass my tenant, I will involve the police." My father cursed him, my mother wept, and they left swearing vengeance, but vengeance never came. They had no power here anymore. The truth is, the more they pushed, the weaker they looked. The relatives who once joined in their guilt campaign began to fall quiet. A cousin even messaged me privately to say, "Good for you. It's about time someone stood up to them." Aunt Clara called to laugh, telling me Grandma would be dancing in heaven. Their empire of control was crumbling, and all I had done was hold my ground. Samantha's decline accelerated. She stopped wearing the designer clothes, traded her luxury apartment for something smaller, more affordable. I overheard her telling a coworker that it wasn't fair, that I had everything. "Didn't she inherit it?" the coworker asked, confusion in their voice. Samantha huffed. "That's not the point." But of course, it was exactly the point. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. I poured myself into my accounting job, took on new consulting clients, and with the money I saved on rent through Daniel's lease, my savings account grew faster than I had ever imagined. For the first time, I had stability. I had security. I had the freedom to plan for a future that belonged to me alone. One evening, while reorganizing Grandma's closet, I discovered a box I had somehow missed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in her looping handwriting and addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened the first. "My dearest Rachel," it began. "I see the way they dim your light, and it breaks my heart. But I also see the fire in you. One day, you'll have the chance to let it burn bright. Don't hesitate. Take what is yours and never apologize for it." Tears blurred the ink as I read letter after letter. She had seen it all. She had planned for this. She had left me not only the house but also the words I needed to hear most: that I was worthy, that I was strong, that I was not invisible. 6 months after Daniel bought the house, he relocated the office to a commercial space. The downstairs quieted again, the hum of computers replaced by the familiar silence of Grandma's rooms. My lease remained intact, ironclad, 10 years of security guaranteed. The house was mine in spirit if not on paper, and I knew one day, when Daniel no longer needed it, it would come back to me fully. The Monroe family, meanwhile, fractured beyond repair. Thanksgiving passed without a call. Christmas came and went with only a single text from my mother. "You're missing Samantha's engagement party." Engagement to whom? I no longer cared to ask. My parents sold their home and moved to another state, chasing anonymity where no one knew the truth of what they had tried and failed to do. One spring evening, as the garden bloomed around me, Mrs. Chen stopped by with tea. She smiled at the roses and said, "Margaret would be proud of you. She always said you were the strong one." I looked around at the house, the garden, the life I had built, and for the first time, I believed it. The quiet that settled over the Willow Street house after the office moved out was unlike anything I had ever known. It was not the suffocating silence of neglect I remembered from childhood, nor the tense silence of waiting for the next demand from my parents. This was a gentle quiet, a stillness that wrapped around me like a blanket. The house felt alive again, not with the noise of meetings and deadlines, but with the echoes of Grandma's voice, the steady rhythm of my own footsteps, and the occasional laughter of neighbors who stopped by with fresh bread or warm greetings. I began to reclaim the rooms one by one. The kitchen was first. I scrubbed it down, polished the counters, and opened every cabinet. I baked bread using Grandma's old recipe card, the smell filling the house until it felt like she might walk through the door at any moment. The living room came next, where I replaced the office chairs with Grandma's floral sofa and her collection of quilts. Each room I touched became a piece of her memory restored. Work was steady, and I found myself thriving in ways I had never expected. With the money Daniel had paid me, and the security of my lease, I no longer lived paycheck to paycheck. I took on clients I enjoyed instead of ones I tolerated. I enrolled in a weekend ceramics class, something I had always wanted to try but never had the freedom for. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged entirely to me, not borrowed, not dictated, not diminished. Meanwhile, news of Samantha trickled in through the grapevine. She had lost her job not long after the office relocated. Her performance, already shaky, had collapsed completely once the pressure mounted. Jennifer, her department head, had let her go after months of warnings. My parents had tried to intervene, but Daniel refused to bend. He told them the company needed results, not excuses. Without her job, Samantha's lifestyle crumbled. She sold her car, then moved in with a friend, then eventually disappeared from social media altogether. I did not celebrate her downfall, though part of me felt the sting of irony. She had once stood in front of me, tears streaming down her face, demanding what was mine because she believed she deserved it. And now, she had nothing, while I sat in the very house she had tried to claim. It was not revenge I felt, but release. The cycle was broken. The weight was gone. My parents grew quieter too. Their calls stopped. Their letters slowed to nothing. From what I heard, they had moved 2 states away, retreating into a small condo near the coast. They had always loved appearances, but after the spectacle on Willow Street, their reputation in town was ruined. Neighbors who once admired their devotion to Samantha now whispered about their cruelty toward me. It was a wound their pride could not survive. On a rainy afternoon, I returned to the box of letters from Grandma. I had read many of them already, but one envelope at the bottom caught my eye. It was marked in bold letters, "For when you are ready." Inside was a single page. "My dear Rachel, I know you will face storms. I know they will try to take from you what is yours. But I also know you. You are stronger than they think, braver than you believe, and smarter than they will ever admit. One day, you will stand in this house and know that you earned every piece of your life. And when that day comes, promise me this: live. Don't just survive. Live fully, freely, joyfully. You have always deserved that." The tears that fell onto the page were not from sadness but from something deeper: recognition. I had survived. I had endured. But now, it was time to live. So I planted new roses in the garden, a row of white ones alongside the red. I opened the windows on warm nights and let the air flow through, carrying with it the scent of jasmine. I invited friends for dinners, filled the house with laughter, and allowed myself to imagine a future not defined by struggle but by choice. I understood now that family is not blood alone. Family is who shows up, who sees you, who loves you without condition. Grandma had been my family. Daniel had become part of it. The neighbors who shared tea, The friends who called to check in, they were my family too. And I realized I had something far richer than the approval of people who had never truly loved me. I had a life of my own making. Spring stretched into summer, and the garden on Willow Street seemed to bloom brighter than ever. Every morning I walked barefoot across the dewy grass, breathing in the scent of roses and lavender, hearing the soft hum of bees as they moved from flower to flower. It was as if the house itself was exhaling after years of tension, finally at peace. For the first time, I understood what Grandma meant when she said a home could carry a soul. Hers was everywhere, in the creak of the floorboards, in the faint scent of cinnamon that lingered in the kitchen, in the steady calm that filled the walls. I began to find joy in small things I had once ignored. I hosted potlucks with neighbors, each dish set on Grandma's long oak table that had seen decades of family meals. I started painting again, something I had loved as a child but abandoned when my parents told me it was a waste of time. On Sunday afternoons, I sat on the porch with Mrs. Chen, sipping tea and listening to her stories about how Grandma had once organized the entire block to save a library from closing. Every story reminded me that Margaret Monroe had been more than just my grandmother. She had been the heart of this neighborhood, a woman who left ripples wherever she went. The house became a gathering place again, but this time on my terms. Friends came over, colleagues stopped by, laughter filled the halls that had once echoed with accusations and threats. I learned what community really meant, what it felt like to belong without begging for it. For so long I had lived on the edges of my family, invisible except when they needed something. Now, I was at the center of something far more genuine. Of course, memories of my parents and Samantha still surfaced. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what they were doing, if they ever thought of me, but the thoughts no longer carried weight. They drifted in and out like passing clouds. The power they once held over me had dissolved. I had no desire to reopen old wounds, no need to chase their approval. The silence between us was no longer painful, it was freedom. One evening, Daniel stopped by with a bottle of wine. He looked around at the changes I had made, the quilts, the paintings, the blooming garden visible through the window, and smiled. "You've made this place alive again," he said. I thanked him, though part of me wanted to tell him that it had been alive all along. I had simply given it permission to breathe. We sat in the kitchen talking for hours, about work, about his plans for the company, about my ceramics class that had turned into a surprising passion. At one point, he leaned back and said, "You know, Samantha never really understood what this house meant. To her, it was just money. To you, it's roots, and that's why it belongs with you." His words landed softly but deeply, like truth often does. Later that night, after he left, I sat in the garden with one of Grandma's letters. This one spoke of choice. "Rachel," it read, "our lives are not measured by what we endure, but by what we choose. Choose joy, choose peace, choose love, even if it means choosing yourself first." I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. For years, I had chosen survival. I had chosen endurance. But now, for the first time, I was choosing joy. I was choosing me. Neighbors often asked if I planned to sell the house one day, to move somewhere new, start fresh. I always shook my head. This was not just real estate. This was a sanctuary, a promise fulfilled, a symbol of everything I had fought for. Leaving it would feel like erasing the journey that brought me here. As the sun set behind the willow trees and the last light kissed the roses, I whispered a promise to Grandma. "I'm living just like you asked me to, fully, freely, joyfully, and I'll keep living, for both of us." If you've ever had to choose between keeping your self-respect or keeping the peace with people who only take from you, I hope you know this. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival. It is strength. It is freedom. And one day, you'll see that the best kind of family is the one you build with love, not the one that demands it without giving any in return.